Welcome, everyone, to Sports Talk Line, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. And on today's episode of Battle for the Big East, we're going to talk with Jim Maisano to talk about basically the comings and goings in this very intricate and very unique offseason, to say the least. Jim, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tom. Thanks for the invitation to be on the show. Should be fun.
Yes. So I guess when we're talking about changes in the Big East, we got to talk coaching changes first. One was not a surprise, in my opinion. One was a surprise. You have the DePaul head coach, Dave Leto, being let go, which was no surprise to anyone. But then you had Steve Wojciechowski being let go, and then Shaka Smart coming in, which I think was very unique, to say the least, in those situations, because Shaka Smart, he does have a solid resume from VCU. Texas, it looked like Texas, when Shaka were heading for a divorce anyway, so Shaka Smart called up the relationship first. But how do you think the Big East is going to be impacted with these two new head coaches at DePaul and Marquette?
Well, I certainly was surprised that Shaka Smart wound up with Marquette. I wasn't surprised that he was going to leave Texas. I mean, as you said, the writing was on the wall that breakup was coming. And, I was a little shocked by Shaka Smart in Texas. I think at Virginia Commonwealth, we all thought he was a terrific coach. I mean, he built that program, national contender, Final Four. I mean, he pretty much, every button he pressed with VCU worked. So I think everyone thought he was a great hire at Texas. So I really thought it would work out better at Texas. And I'm a little surprised, particularly this year where they had a lot of talent. Texas was loaded this year, and he wasn't able to make it happen. So I guess I don't really know what we have with Shaka Smart. I know we have a great VCU mid-major coach and a good coach at Texas, maybe not a great coach. So he picks Marquette. Now, the first thing I was surprised by, Tom, maybe you already knew, I didn't, that he was from Wisconsin. He grew up in the state of Wisconsin.
I heard he had some roots there, so that might.
Yeah, he actually lived there. He grew up there. So most of his life he grew up there. So he went home. Mm-hmm. And that kind of makes the Marquette move, makes more sense why I picked Marquette. He went home. It's a great program for him. I mean, Marquette, they won a championship in 1977. I remember sneaking to watch that game when I was in 8th grade, watching the 1970s national championship. They've had some really good teams in the last few years. They never really can get to like the finals of the Big East, but sometimes they get to the semifinals. It's a good program, but he's also working into a tough spot. Like we just discussed that they've lost everybody. Most of the lineup is gone. So he started from scratch, although it does seem like he brought in some good transfers.
Yeah, it's with Shaka Smart coming into Marquette. I think there's a lot of people you're kind of waiting. It's almost like you're almost better off announcing you are coming back than instead of you are transferring. But they did lose Theo John to Duke. I wonder if Coach Steve Wojciechowski set that up anyway, since he does have some Duke connections. But, Marquette, I like their core players with Dawson Garcia and especially Justin Lewis. I thought they brought a toughness that you didn't see at Marquette. But they also lost a few other transfers. I believe Kobe McEwen decided to leave Marquette, but which I think is he would have definitely helped out. And also, DJ Carton left. Pretty much a lot of the key players from this year left. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But is there anything you can say about DePaul going through some changes on top and bringing in Stubblefield, the former Oregon assistant?
Well, first of all, we knew DePaul was going to make a coaching change, right? Yep. I don't think anyone thought that Dave would survive another season. Tony Stubblefield certainly got a great resume coaching with Dana Altman and an extremely well-coached team every year is Oregon. It's one thing that stands out when you watch Oregon play, that they're very well coached. He's apparently a good recruiter, but he's walking into a tough spot there. They're not even the best team in the city of Chicago. Loyola Chicago is a better team than DePaul. Mm-hmm. They got Javon Freeman Liberty back at 14 points a game and David Jones at 5 points a game, and in limbo, Romeo Weems at 7.3 points a game. But other than that, he's got a big turnover on the roster, and I'm not quite sure what we'll get out of DePaul. That's going to be a rebuild, I think, this year.
Yeah, don't worry. I think they left their impact on St. John's fans this past season. I'll just say that about DePaul. But it's also, too, about, I believe they were talking about Porter Moses, since you brought up Chicago. But Porter Moses ended up going to Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is almost an established program. There's very little tinkering to do, while DePaul is pretty much a reclamation job, to say the least.
I agree.
But since we talked about the coaching changes, let's switch over, because the NCAA granted all players who played winter sports an extra year of eligibility. There was kind of some rumblings who would take advantage of it, who wouldn't. And it looked like the Big East, there were some key players who took advantage of this. Jim, who are some of those key players that are coming back for a fifth year in Big East play, much to the chagrin of some of the competition?
Well, I thought, we were talking before the show, what jumped out at me was Samuels and Gillespie coming back to Villanova. That's what jumped out at me. I mean, no team, I think, got that much firepower back with fifth-year seniors. They're both terrific players. Gillespie's one of the better point guards in America. And I'm convinced let's talk in December, Tom, but I'm convinced that Villanova is going to come out this season on fire because they have the whole team back. They know the Jay Wright system. So many teams in America are dealing with 3, 4, 5 transfers coming in. Those teams are not going to be playing that well on day one in November. They might take all of November, December to kind of get their act together. They got to learn the coach's system, learn the coach's defense. They got to learn to play together as teammates. That's not Villanova. Villanova's going to come back and pick up where they left off when they lost to Baylor in the Sweet 16.
Yes, and also I want to point out they lost to Baylor without Colin Gillespie. You know, I really think Gillespie's injury could be a blessing in disguise for the 2022 season. The reason why is I felt like the timing of that injury kind of like, you know what, he wants to come back for another year. He could kind of, because who knows how his draft stock would be. I don't know where he was on any mock drafts. So I think that's one. And the second thing is, too, Chris Arcidiacono, yes, that name is familiar to Villanova fans, Ryan's younger brother, he got key playing time. And remember, Villanova, they gave Baylor a game. They gave Baylor a game more than Gonzaga did. You know, so I think this is something to definitely look forward to. But
I agree.
Who else are some of the other fifth-year seniors who are coming back in the Big East, Jim?
Paul Scruggs with Xavier. It was one that jumps out at me. That's a really solid Big East player, 14 points a game. He's coming back. I thought that was a very interesting one. And there was somebody with Baylor. Refresh my recollection. Do you remember the Baylor player? I'm sorry, Baylor. Butler.
I
often mix up Baylor and Butler because the best player on Baylor was Butler.
Yeah. So Baylor or Butler, you got me saying it. You have a lot of people coming back. You have Aaron Thompson coming back, who I think is going to be one of the key players.
10 points a game.
Yeah, it looks like Butler is pretty much returning their entire roster. So that I think is something that's key, even though they kind of did struggle a little bit in the Big East play. And I feel like Butler and UConn have the same type of playing style where they prefer to play the rock fights. But I think, you know, Butler looks like they're going to take another step up. But, you know, speaking about taking a step up, there was one team that I think went through the highs and lows, and we didn't mention this before, but I look at Georgetown, where they went from the high of the Big East, winning the miraculous run, winning the Big East championship, to pretty much a lot of their key players aren't returning. Qudus Wahab decided to transfer. Javon Blair and Jamaro Pickett are not taking advantage of that extra year. So
they lost their 4 leading scorers.
Yes. So I really think that's something that's going to impact Georgetown, where you know how the fates can change in a week, to say the least.
I read that Georgetown had a really strong recruiting class, but of course they're going to be freshmen on day one. So I do think Georgetown takes a step back.
Yeah, I think that they will, unfortunately. But you mentioned their recruiting class. One of the players has another familiar last name, Ryan Mutombo. He's the 4-star center, son of Dikembe Mutombo. They have Amun Muhammad, who's the top recruit. Some people have him as top 25 in the nation. Also Jordan Riley from Long Island, who went who's going in there. So it looks like too, I think Georgetown could be once again a year away if all these pieces stay together, but that's a big if.
Jordan Riley, you may remember, Tom, because both of us frequent St. John's Twitter.
Yes.
St. John's fans believed they were getting Jordan Riley, and there were people putting, my sources tell me that St. John's is getting Jordan Riley. Of course, we found out he picked Georgetown, they had St. John's. St. John's Twitter was ablaze on that.
Yeah. I will say this about the new St. John's coaching staff. You do not know who they're recruiting until the recruit announces their final two.
Yes, they're very careful. Not like the prior Mullen administration where they were leaking all over the place.
Yeah. So, and that's just on the court too.
Right.
But yeah, so you kind of got that going for them. You know, we talked about the fifth year players returning, and also
Tom, we missed one.
Who else
a player I like to watch play because he reminds me of the Big East from the 1980s when I grew up, and that was Nate Watson with Providence.
Yes.
He's an old-time power forward center in the good old Big East days. I like watching him play. I understand college basketball's changed a lot from those days, but he's a bad boy in the middle of that court for Providence.
In a good way. In a good way.
Yes, in a good way.
I think St. John's fans were like, great, we get to face him twice now.
Yes.
Because he put up monster numbers, to say the least. And he's someone who, you know, he brings that physicality that you do not see that often. But, you know, I feel like we got all the key returners.
Wait, one other thing I want to point out. So my son goes to the University of South Carolina.
Okay.
One of the better players on the team the last few years was Justin Minaya, who is the son of the former general manager of the New York Mets. He's a very solid all-around player. He's going to Providence on a transfer from South Carolina. That was a great pickup for Providence. When you see Justin Minaya plays defense, he rebounds, he makes the nice pass, can even hit a three. He's a complete player at the college basketball level.
Yeah, because I think when I look at Providence, I think Ed Cooley's teams, I always give them the benefit of the doubt, but I really think this was the first time they really underachieved.
They did.
And I think Ed Cooley, you know, he's benefiting. I think Noah Holkler is also coming back with Nate Watson. So you're going to have that big front court.
And they got Al Durham from Indiana.
Yes, they are losing David Duke, who's deciding to go to the NBA draft. But, you know, we kind of already started too. Who else, you know, let's start talking about some of the players that were leaving the Big East through transferring. And we mentioned transferring Big East players. I think St. John's, where some people were not surprised and some people were surprised, to say the least, of some of the people who were leaving.
Well, I think all St. John's fans were very surprised that two people in particular transferred because they seemed like core players. They were tight with the coach. They were tight with the team. And they were there from freshman year. And that's Greg Williams, right, of course, who's leaving. And that's kind of frustrating. And Marcus Earlington.
Yeah.
Those are the two guys. They really improved each year. They got better and better. They were key players last year for the team. Everyone thought they were coming back and they transferred. I think from what I heard from behind the scenes, doing the College Hoops Chat radio show, talking to some people that knowledgeable in St. John's, even the coaching staff was surprised.
Yeah, I think with Earlington, he wanted to get more minutes because his minutes went down a little bit. And I think Greg Williams, he transferred to Louisiana Lafayette, and he's from Louisiana. So so he went home, so you can kind of understand that going forward. Can we think of any other notable Big East transfers outside of just St. John's? Because it's not just St. John's, even though they kind of led the way, unfortunately.
Yeah, St. John's had like 7 or 8, I think.
Yeah.
I saw that Jonathan McGriff is going to be going to Binghamton. Did you see that? That was just announced.
Yes, I did see that too. No, I'll tell you this, McGriff, I liked him as a backup point guard. You know, when Posh Alexander got hurt, he was able to jump in there. He still ran the team. You know, he played a similar style as Posh Alexander, but, you know, he needs to do what's best for him. But, you know, there's a lot of key players that kind of did leave. Seton Hall, they kind of lost Shavar, who's transferred out. I believe Shavar Reynolds and Talik Molson decided to transfer out.
Yes, 2 of them. That's right.
You know,
Creighton, I think, lost a couple. Well, actually, they had a lot of seniors too that they decided not to come back. Creighton. Yeah. Creighton is in trouble. Creighton lost a lot of players. I'm looking at this list of departed or expected to depart. Zagorowski at 16 points a game.
Yep.
Balak at 10 points a game. Mahoney at 12.5 points a game. Damon Jefferson at 12 points a game, and Christian Bishop at 11 points a game. 5 double-digit starters will not be back for Creighton. Creighton will not be a power next year in the Big East.
No, I think, you got to wonder too how much Coach McDermott's comments impacted those decisions. I don't think anyone was surprised by Zagorowski. The Bishop transfer, I love the way Christian Bishop was playing during the NCAA tournament. I felt like he finally brought that interior presence that Creighton never really had. He can get some of the tough baskets inside. So I think, this is another year where I think Creighton, they do have a top class coming in, but I do think they're not going to be the team fighting Villanova for a conference title, to say the least.
The one guy that I thought was a very nice player, he just wasn't on a very good team, and he transferred out, but I do think he had the potential to be a real star in the Big East, was Charlie Moore on DePaul. Yeah. And he transferred out. He's a very solid player. He was a nightmare in that horrible game that St. John's lost the same to DePaul down the stretch.
Yeah, it wasn't a loss. It was a season-ending fatality, pretty much.
Yes, it really was.
Recover from it. But Charlie Moore, too, I definitely do agree. I think Charlie Moore is on his 4th school now. He went from Kansas to California to DePaul. He's taking advantage of the extra year. But I think if he had the right supporting cast around him, I think he would do a tremendous job. But since we already talked about –
Well, just one I went through out, Cole Swider. He was a good shooter from the outside of Villanova, 6 points a game. He transferred to Syracuse. That was a surprise.
Yeah, I guess you can say so. Villanova, I think that was the only Villanova defection outside of the NBA draft. But it looks like we got all the key players who transferred out. Who are some of the key players transferring in? And I think leading off, you got to focus on Seton Hall and St. John's, because I think they kind of won the transfer portal. Seton Hall didn't need to win the transfer portal as much, but I think St. John's did with all the defections.
One thing about St. John's I'm curious about, though, is they still have 2 scholarships open.
Yes.
So they could get even better. I'm curious to see that. We see a lot of rumors on hashtag SJUBB, but I think some of them are just that, rumors, so we won't even talk about them today. Mm-hmm. But the 4 players they came in are coming in for St. John's are 4 solid players. They'll go right into the rotation and maybe be better than the players they replace.
Yes, I think that's the one thing a lot of people are talking about. And I think when you look at what Mike Anderson did is because, one, you had very little fanfare about when players were announcing or coming in. But I think with Mike Anderson, he wanted to address defense. Some of the players he brought in Aaron Wheeler from Purdue. He's about a 6'9" forward type who can play the perimeter. So you got some defense and rebounding there.
And a player, let me just add, Tom, a player who was in the rotation for an NCAA tournament team at the top end of the Big Ten.
Yes, and also another player that was in the rotation for a tournament team is Montez Mathis. And I think a lot of people are talking about his defense is up there with Posh Alexander. So if you can double up that could be something going forward.
I agree. And I think he was a great transfer because he fits perfectly into the 40 minutes of hell defense that Mike Anderson demands of his team. I think Mathis goes right in and plays that style on day one.
Yes. And also too, they added a shooter in Steph Smith from Vermont. He had 13 points a game at Vermont. I believe he had 19 points against St. John's in that 1-point win at Carnesecca 2 years ago. But I think the literal missing piece is Joel Soriano, who's transferring in from Fordham. He had about average 10 points, close to 10 rebounds a game at Fordham. Even though Fordham doesn't have the best record, he could be that final big body, which has been the missing piece, it looks like, since Lou Carnesecca retired, maybe. But while I can't say anything bad about Mike Jarvis, St. John's did make a run to the Elite Eight at least one year. But
can I add 2 things on those 2 players?
Sure.
So Steph Smith, I was debating somebody on Twitter one night, and they were saying that I don't know about Steph Smith. He's a mid-major player. I said, for the last 2 years, he's averaged 40% from the 3-point line. Just get the guy open. Just have to get Steph Smith open. He can shoot. Yeah. It doesn't matter if he's a mid-major player. Just get him open. And in the Mike Anderson system, they do get a lot of open threes because of the defense they play. So it makes Steph Smith probably a nice addition. So one funny thing about Joel Soriano, I own a prep That's
Okay.
where I went to high school. My son went to Iona Prep. He went to Stepanek. Joe Sariano, our arch rival. We have these bitter, tough basketball games. I've been seeing Joe Sariano his whole career. He's someone that got a lot better from high school on. I felt bad for Fordham because Fordham's trying to get the program back. Soriano was their best player. I felt bad they lost him, but I'm certainly happy for St. John's. I do think he has the potential to be the missing link for St. John's basketball.
Yeah, speaking of key additions, make sure you make a key addition and hit that like and subscribe button so you can get all these episodes of Battle for the Big East going forward. But, we kind of talked about St. John's who won, but I really think Seton Hall, I kind of felt coming in with Sandro Mamkikashvili, felt like he was going pro. They announced some transfers coming out first. I thought they might be at the bottom half, but man, it looked like they won the transfer portal. What can you tell us about some of the Seton Hall transfers coming in?
Well, there were three of them, right? One of them is Alex Yetna, 9.5 points a game at South Florida. Kaderi Richmond, only 6.3 points a game. But if you saw Syracuse play, he's a very solid player. And the third one came from American University, Jamar Harris, averaging 20 points a game. So, look, Kevin Willard's a great coach. Sometimes I watch these Seton Hall fans on Twitter giving a hard time to Willard. I think he's a terrific coach. He went right to work on the transfer portal. He's a player development guy. People that go to Seton Hall get better during their time at Seton Hall. And getting those three players in, Harris, Yetna, and Richmond. And by the way, they got Jared Roden back. They got Miles Kale back. Tyrese Samuel back. They're a good team. They're going to be a really solid team.
Yes. And now before we go, Jim, I want to ask this question because I think we might have talked about this on your show before, where, there was whispers that St. John's could get a superstar to transfer in. And, do you see those whispers or those comments dying down? Like, no, what? It's not happening. Or is there something to that? And if there is, who could it be?
Well, there's two names. One is Bryce Thompson from Kansas. But every time I see him on the internet, his name on the internet, he's going to possibly 2 or 3 schools. It's never St. John's. And the other one is Jose Alvarado, that people think he might come back for his 5th year if he doesn't go to the NBA. That's probably the hotter rumor I see online. But from what I hear, and I did make one call about this to someone that knows things, they're both rumors at this point.
Gotcha. There's nothing set. So
no.
All right. Yeah, it sounds about right, but it looks like, the Big East, I think, is going to be a much stronger conference next year. They're definitely going to get more than 4 teams in to the NCAA tournament, in my opinion. But Jim, before we leave, can you tell us where we can find you on social media and anywhere else you talk sports?
Well, thank you. So I have a basketball show that's on the radio on WVOX in New Rochelle. So you can find us online at www.collegehoopschat.com. We also have a Twitter page, which is at COLL Hoops Chat, or you can find me on Twitter at JimMaisano.com. I'm talking college basketball all the time.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Jim. And remember,
thanks for the invitation. It was fun.
Yes, no problem. And remember, listen like you play with intensity.